In this video, we are going to talk about how to properly read a pedigree. I get contacted quite a bit with people asking me, "Hey Lee, will you look at this pedigree and let me know what you think? I am interested in putting a couple of dogs together, and here it is for you to review to help all the dogs in the world, be better at what they're doing." So, if you find this content beneficial, do me a favor by liking and subscribing or sharing this information so it can benefit other people becoming a better breeder. We've been doing this for 26 years, breeding dogs for 26 years, working dogs for 36 years. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in animal sciences, and I worked at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Gardens for the Center for Conservation of Research of Endangered Wildlife. Animal work is what my life is invested in, and because of that, I would say I'm pretty qualified to speak on this issue. Now, that said, let's go ahead and jump into it. And the way I'm going to jump into it, I would like to share a document. This is just a little summary of things that I'm going to cover in this video. The title of the video being Breeding Better Dogs. I oftentimes hear the question, does the dog make the pedigree or does the pedigree make the dog? And the answer is it's both. It's kind of like a one-line phrase for people to debate online where they're saying, "Hey, does the dog make the pedigree or the pedigree make the dog?" And people come out and about 50% of the people will say the pedigree makes the dog because without the pedigree, you don't get the dog. And then other people will come out and say, well, it's the dog that makes the pedigree because you're selecting for the animal. And what good is the pedigree if you don't have a good dog? So you have to choose the dog. The truth is, if you want to be a good breeder, it's both. If you take shortcuts and breed to good dogs that have unknown or questionable pedigrees, who knows what your results be, because they're not just going to throw what they are, they're also going to throw what they come from. And if you just chase the pedigree and you have a good pedigree, you have to realize that there's a litter of dogs that had that same pedigree, and some of those dogs in that litter did not meet the criteria of that lineage. And so therefore you have to select the right individual. In both cases, you want both a quality pedigree and a quality dog. Now, the next thing, when selecting the traits, I suggest you identify what's important to you. So when I do this, I'm going to go ahead and go to my website first. We'll come back to that sheet in just a minute. But on my website, I'm going to pull up a pedigree. This is just a dog that we have named Bam Bam. We'll scroll down here and we can look at a particular breeding, but let's go to Bam Bam's breeding. As I look at this, we're going to pull this pedigree up and see this screen here, and we'll see Bam Bam is the dog right here. In fact, I'll probably just go ahead and click on him. We'll come back to that pedigree in just a sec. So here's Bam Bam. And if you look at Bam Bam, you'll see that he's off of Boomer and he's off of Miss Bandit. So Boomer is his sire and Miss Bandit is his mother. Well, both of these dogs, both Boomer and Miss Bandit, right here and here, are both sired by this dog, Frankie Bump. Okay, so Frankie Bump is the sire to both of those dogs, which means this pedigree is double bred Frankie Bump, which means you're going to see Frankie Bump 2 times in the pedigree. And you can see him right there as well as right there. So what are you going to look at first, the pedigree or the dog? Well, it kind of depends on what you're doing. If you're looking for a prospect that you're going to be purchasing at a very young age, then you're obviously going to be looking at the pedigree first because the puppy's not even here yet. And that puppy has to grow up to fully express its potential and its traits. However, let's say you're looking for a stud dog. To be honest with you, even then, or a dam, even then you're going to look at the pedigree first, just to make sure that this line is known for the traits that you're looking for. But once you see that that line has those traits, then you're going to have to look at the dog, and you're going to have to look at the dog very carefully. At first, you're not going to look at the pedigree a whole lot. You're just kind of scan it real quick, and you'll come back to look at this more later. But you're going to do a very thorough examination of this dog. You're going to look and see if it identifies and displays the traits that you're looking for. So let's go look at that list of things that we have here. And I'm going to pull that up in our video. And we have a list of things that you need to prioritize. And so I highly recommend that you make a list of the traits that you desire. All right. And what I mean by that is you need to be honest with yourself. What is it that you're trying to do or accomplish for this dog or with this dog? What is it, the job that the dog has to fulfill? Is it a family companion guardian? Is it a hog catch dog? Is it just a pet that's going to be stable with your kids? Whatever it is that you do, okay, you need to make that list and be very honest with it. Now, for me, since I like dogs for protection work or hog catch, I'm going to prioritize things according to my desire. However, even if you have different desires, I still highly recommend that you put stability first and health second. So, stability is going to be most important because with stability, this individual is going to be safe with your family. Okay. You want to make sure it's safe with your family. If that dog is stable, what that means is it's predictable. Think about like a balance beam. If you're not stable on that balance beam, you could fall to the left, you could fall to the right. Who knows where you're going to go and what you're going to do. So you need to know that if the animal's going to be around your family, that its behavior is predictable. If you put it in a situation, you know what it's going to do because you have a good understanding that this individual operates with a clear mind and body. Next, you need to look at health. Health is extremely important. I see a lot of people that breed these American bullies or these little short-legged bulldog type dogs. You got long coat, hair coat, fuzzies, whatever. It's ridiculous because the bulldog was once an animal that could catch a bull. Now it's an animal that can't even knock over a trash can to get a leftover piece of meat from a bull out of the trash. So they've lost that ability to perform because their health has gone downhill. If any breeder that says we charge so much because we schedule C-sections because they can't give birth naturally, stay away from those people. They're breeding unhealthy dogs and they know it. So if anybody's scheduling C-sections, that tells you that health is not a priority for them. All right. Next, if you're going to have a working dog, I like to put drive. All right. Then confidence. We're going to go through this quickly because we're going to get to the pedigree. Confidence, coordination, be a good nervous system. What I mean by that is a lot of times when people put nerves up, they're talking about the mental stability and confidence. This is not what I'm talking about here. We've already talked about stability and confidence. Here, the nervous system has to deal with coordination, that they have good sensory and good muscle firing, where they're able to move efficiently with a balance of athletic ability, agility, durability, and power. All right. And the reason why I put all of these with the versus symbol here is because a lot of times when you increase durability and power, you might give up agility or stamina or heat tolerance. So you have to balance all of those things. And because of that, we're going to have endurance here also. All right, endurance is extremely important. I see I've got durability again, but this time we're trying to have a durable animal that is going to be efficient. It's going to not have to have problems with its health. We don't want to deal with hip dysplasia. Here, I mean, durability is like as far as taking punishment for protection work or hog catch. Here, I mean durability in the sense of when it works out or gets old, is the dog going to be crippled? This is a different type of durability. This is sound structure, is what I'm talking about. Structural soundness. I got it down there also. I need to revise this a little bit, but these things need to be prioritized. Efficient movement versus static conformation. Forget about dog shows, y'all. These people that walk around in dog shows that say, oh, the dog's angle should be this and the angle should be that, or the structure should be this and the structure should be that. These people are trying to pretend that they're gods and they can look at the structure of an animal and determine which one is going to move the best because its structure is quote unquote mathematically correct. When you look at structure, you're only looking at structure. You're not looking at the cardiovascular, the lymphatic, the endocrine, the circulatory, the heat tolerance, the stamina, the durability. There's so many, the desire. There's so many things that come into play when it comes into movement that static conformation does not measure. If you want to know if the dog moves good, you have to have the dog move and see if it moves good. Now, we can certainly, the statement, if all else is equal, then yes, it's true that the dog with the best structure is going to outperform the dogs with the lesser structure. But never, is all else equal, unless they're identical twins. And even then, is all else equal? Did they both go to the gym? Did they both get fed the same thing? Was one raised identical to the other? Because how they're raised is a training or conditioning situation. Then you have a nutritional situation. So never is all else equal. Did one get sick and one not? Okay. Did one have an injury when it was young? Never is all else equal. I want to look at efficient movement versus static conformation. Next up, recovery time. Let the dog rest after you've worked it out. If you want a dog that's going to be able to perform in protection work or hog catch and see, or agility, or dock diving, or wall climb, or weight pull, whatever it is that you're doing, if you're, or just playing with your family, let it rest and then see how the dog gets up after it's laid down for 30 minutes or an hour. Did it get up really stiff and move slowly? Or did it get up and say, hey, I feel great. I'm ready to go again? Because if the dog gets up and is very vibrant and very active, then you're probably dealing with an animal that's got a good recovery time. All right. These are all things that you need to look at. Don't breed a dog just because it is famous. There's some people that make this mistake. I remember a particular band dog breeder one time that I asked him, hey, what line of pit bull did you use? And he said he had Heinzel blood. So I asked him to send me the pedigree. I had to go back like 6 generations or 7 generations to find Howard Heisel's name in that pedigree one time, just one time. It was a total joke. The guy just was repeating what he was told, and it wasn't even true. Because if you went back on the other branches of that pedigree further back, there was no Heinzel blood in there. Okay, it was just one time in the pedigree. So don't fall for hype. Don't chase something that's just because it's famous. You need to do your homework. It's on you. Does the dog have the traits that you want? Now we're going to look at this particular one here as we review the pedigree on my website. I've identified the traits that I want, and I'll mention some of those traits as we look through the pedigree. All right, if you have a line of dogs, does that dog that you're possibly looking at breeding into your line bring in the traits that you desire, while also at the same time not bring in any traits that you find highly undesired? Bam Bam, this dog has the traits that I desire. He's got great drive, great stability, great athleticism, good durability, very good stamina, good heat tolerance. This dog is bringing it all. You know what? He could have easily had a litter mate that didn't. I don't know of any of the dogs that were his litter mates that didn't perform well. The consistency was very, very good in that litter. However, the Sorrels line of dogs is very well known for having the traits that I desire. That said, there are some individuals in the Sorrels line that don't have the traits that I desire. So when I said you have to select for the traits that you specifically want while making sure you don't bring any traits that you don't want, you'll know that we're going to be looking at the Sorrels line of dogs quite a bit. And when I looked at the Sorrels line of dogs, historically, they were known for exceptional performance. However, there were some dogs in that gene pool that still performed very well for Bert Sorrell's goals or Madison Parker's goals that may not have been what I personally looked for. And because of this, we need to identify, again, individuals within a population that have the traits that you desire while making sure you don't bring any undesired traits for your goals, because we're all breeding for our own goals. So yes, while I breed Sorrel's line, the truth of it is I'm breeding Robinson dogs now, right? Because I'm breeding the line slightly different. What was it about some of the Sorrel's dogs that I wanted to stay away from? Well, since I'm breeding dogs for legal hog hunting and legal protection work, I'm wanting to prioritize a couple of things that Bert Sorrells may not have prioritized back when he was in the competitive game dog world. I need a dog that's going to have a little bit more size. I'm not matching animals up in competition, illegal today, by the way, for events where they're going to have to do combat against another individual of the same weight. When you're going hog hunting or doing protection work, you don't know the size of your adversary. So you want to be as big as you can be while still being efficient. As a result of that, I stayed away from smaller dogs. I didn't want a smaller individual that could be picked up and tossed over a fence or tossed into a bedroom and the door closed really quickly. Even if it was a very tenacious individual, if you get in a doorway and you're working with that door, you could possibly get that dog off of you in a protective situation. Or if it's in the woods with a hog, you could get slammed against a tree and killed or very seriously injured. And when that happens, that dog's going to be out of commission, right? Because it's now separated from the engagement. So I needed a dog that had a little more size. Also, because I like to train, I don't want any dogs that are nervous. There are some pit bulls out there in the Sorrel's line that are a little bit timid and a little bit skittish. Not very many of them. Most of them are very confident dogs, but there are some that are that way. However, they still perform very, very well. As a trainer for protection work or obedience or agility or whatever it is that I want to do, I don't want a nervous individual. So while that may not have been a common trait in the Sorrel's line, it did exist. And I wanted to make sure I stayed away from that. So I looked for a lot of confidence and I looked for some of the bigger dogs. All right, so we've got Boomer, who is nearly identical to Bam Bam. You put these two dogs side by side, and one day I might call them the wrong name because they're like twins. They're so much alike. Now, I do know the difference between the two, but man, they are very, very similar. Let's see if we've got any other pictures of Bam Bam here. If we do, yes, we do. I think we do. Yes. So this is Bam Bam. And then we'll look at Boomer in just a second. All right. And then here's his sire, Boomer. And we'll check out some of his pictures. And they look like nearly identical. But he's only got two pictures in the pedigree database. All right. So tons of consistency between sire and son. But then also we have Miss Bandit. Now, Miss Bandit, if you look at her bottom side, she goes back to a female named Sadie. Sadie was a dog known for great athleticism and great gameness, a lot of good athletic ability here. And she is sired by a dog named Slippin' Jimmy. Slippin' Jimmy was a dog that was known for tremendous gameness. He didn't have as much ability, but he had tremendous gameness. And he was sired by Big Daddy. Now, Big Daddy was a high performing dog with good gameness and ability, just like Sadie and just like Frankie Bomb. And because of this, I knew that this line was a very well established line of game dogs. And with Big Daddy being a big dog himself, he was in the high 50s, competition weight in the low 50s. This was a very big dog. And Frankie Bomp followed suit. Frankie Bomp was on the chain right here. He's probably like 58 or 60 pounds. His competition weight would have been right around 50. So these were some pretty big game dogs. And they were all extremely bold. The only one that had any timidness at all would be possibly Boots of Blacksmith and maybe Sadie. And even they weren't timid. They were just not social with strangers. Okay. And because they weren't social with strangers, they had a protective instinct to them kind of naturally. All right. But they weren't afraid of, like, let's just say, an animal came out and challenged them. They were about that hunting life. When we did this breeding, I made sure that we didn't have any dogs that were timid for my program. And so we selected Miss Bandit here based on her athleticism, her size, and her confidence to be bold wherever she goes. I wanted to make sure I did not have any timidness possibly coming in here, even though I would not call these dogs timid. Okay, they were just not boldly confident when they met new people. They were a little bit suspect. Now, some people would like that for protection work, but I believe that the pit bull should be bred to its true old standard of high gameness, good confidence, and somewhat social. So when I do protection work with a pit bull, I tend to do it more out of a training aspect than a suspicious aspect. All right. So we selected for our size here, size there, confidence here, confidence there, athletic ability and performance here, athletic ability and performance there, health here, health there. Same here, same here, same here. Misfit is a daughter of a very good producer named Cupcake, who was tied for third producer of all time for females. So I knew that this dog had the paperwork that you could trust her ability to produce. I know this dog. I owned her, right? And so let's look at her for just a minute and say, well, if you own her but you don't know all of her ancestors, what do you know? Well, I know Pokey. I met Pokey. I'm one of the few people around today that actually knows Pokey. I had my hands on this dog back in 2003 and 2004. And you can see that this breeding of Rosebud has Pokey twice on the top. And if you go back, we know that Muzzle is a great dog. Mucho Dinero was a great dog. Sailor 2 was the son of Sailor, who was a great dog. This dog Sailor goes back to the Hard Eyes Miss Bandit breeding. I personally spoke with Bert Sorrells and asked him what was his favorite female of all time, and he told me Bandit. All right, so Bandit was bred to Hard Eyes, and he told me that breeding was the only breeding that he ever did that never produced a cur. So what we know here is if we have a lot of sorrels in here that goes back to that Hard Eyes and Bandit breeding, that's a big plus. Now let's look at some of the other influences here, and we're going to go to okay. So if we look at stats, what do you see? You see Miss Bandit is the second most influential dog in that pedigree at 32%. All right, now if we look at, let's base it right on the AGR, we see Pokey is the most influential on the AGR influence. Now, not on the percentage of blood. If we go by percentage of blood, we're going to have Mucho Dinero first and then Bandit second at 26.56 and 26, basically. So just a 0.5% more than Bandit. But if you look at the AGR, which is the basic genetic contribution that they're truly making based on the inbreeding that has occurred in the pedigree, and you'll see that she's at 32%, but Mucho Dinero is at 50%. However, let's rank it. Instead of being ranked on this column, we're going to rank it on the AGR or percentage of inbreeding. And you'll see that Pokey is number 1. Pokey is this dog right here, and you'll see him in the top left corner of the banner on my YouTube video. This dog is a dog that I met in real life. He was a giant dog. When I met him, he had to be over 70 pounds, but his competition weight was in the high 50s. And that was a big beast of a dog, very, very powerful, very, very confident. I really liked Pokey a lot. And if you actually look at his pedigree, he is a heavily bred Davis's Boomerang bloodline of dog. Okay, so this is a no joke type of dog. I cannot go back to the Davis's Boomerang stuff from personal knowledge because I was a kid in those days. However, Davis's Boomerang is unquestionably one of the greatest pit bulls that ever looked through a collar. And so since I know that Pokey is basically built off of that line, that's a big plus. Now you'll find other pedigrees for Pokey, but I actually know how Pokey was bred because of Madison Parker. He gave me the true pedigree on Bubba Bo. Okay, and this is a heavy Boomerang bred dog. Let's go click on Raisin. And you'll see that Raisin is basically a Boomerang bred dog. Because his top side is Bubba Bo, which goes back to Baker Davis's Boomerang, and his bottom side is basically Baker Davis's Boomerang. And then the bottom side comes down here to Miss Boomerang. Miss Boomerang is a Boomerang dog being bred back into the Sorrells dogs that goes back to that Tudor Carver cross. So nothing but quality coming in from Pokey. All right. So if we see Pokey here and we see Sailor here, who's off of the Hard Eyes Bandit combination, and then we see Bandit here, I know that I'm dealing with major quality influence dogs. The only thing I can't say is were they competent or were they nervous? Well, I know Pokey was not nervous because I had my hands and eyes on that dog myself. Now, Sailor, I never had my eyes on him, but I talked to Madison about the dog. Nothing but high regard. And Bert Sorrells told me when I asked him a vague question, what was your best female of all time? He said, Bandit. She was the best producer of all time. So while he didn't really have a reason to lie about Bandit, because I didn't say, what do you think of Bandit? I said, what was your best female? I didn't say, what do you think of Bandit? I said, what is your best female? And this is what he told me. So word your questions in a way where you're more likely to obtain truth instead of obtain a sales pitch. So all of these dogs, if we check out Bam Bam's pedigree itself, Bam Bam has some outs in him coming from this Sadie, which goes back to Boots, which goes back to here. Now, these dogs here still have sorrels, but they're not as much sorrels as some of these other dogs. So let's look at his stats. And we're going to look at the AGR on him. And you'll see that he's got a tremendous influence from Frankie Bomp. Now, his actual percentage of blood from Frankie Bomp is only 50%. But because of the line breeding behind the dogs in the pedigree combined with the line breeding in Frankie Bomp, basically 61% of the genes that are in Frankie Bomp are also shared in Bam Bam. Okay? That's basically what that means. All right? So don't send me your pedigrees. What you need to do is you need to go through and look at all of the dogs in the pedigree. And some of these dogs you're not going to find information on, but I know that this dog's awesome. I know that this dog's awesome. I know that this dog's awesome. I know that this dog's awesome because I had my hands on her. I know that dog's awesome because I had my hands on him, had my hands on her, had my hands on her. All of these dogs in the first generation and second generation, I personally had my hands on. Had my hands on her, I had my hands on him. I did not ever see her. Madison spoke highly of her. I did not see him, but I have seen videos of him when he was hunting, when Madison was slingshot hunting, and Madison also speaks very highly on him. This dog here is one dog in the pedigree that I don't know much about. So what do? Is I click on her and see if there's any dogs behind here that I do know or do not know. I see that Sailor dog. I knew him. I had a son of Sailor before named, actually, I had a son of Sailor too, named Captain Skip. So I know that influence from there. Great reports about Mucho Dinero. Let's see, great reports about Sorrel's muzzle. And then great reports about Bud Light. Great reports about Roadblock. Also great reports about Uncle Bud. This is the son of STP. Okay, so we have to remember some of these dogs were in the 80s and 90s, right? So there are dogs that I would not have been able to have my hands on. But I also know that she is a great producer. Like I said, Cupcake was the top 3 producer female of all time. So while there are some unknowns in Miss Bucky, there's also nothing there that I do know is bad. So everything that I do know here is good. Cherokee, if we look at his pedigree, we're going to see Pokey twice, tons of nothing but high regards for Pokey as far as I'm concerned. So we're going to skip this and look at the other half of the pedigree. We got Dial and Cheddar. Cheddar is a half sibling to a dog that I own named Captain Skip, coming off of Sailor. And then here we know that Muzzle was a great dog, and we know that Mucho Dinero was a great dog, and Sailor Girl is the son of Sailor. So this side of the pedigree is a little bit harder to track information on because we're going back to the 80s and 90s and whatnot. But at least everything that I see here is good. I don't see anything that's of a concern. I've never seen anything bad in these particular animals. Now, what next? Misfit. This is the daughter of Cupcake again. So let's look at Sidekick. This is the Pokey, direct son of Pokey, going back to Sailor 2. Okay, so nothing but good there. And then we have Big Daddy, who I know through Madison Parker. So for 3 generations, nothing but solid dogs. Most people only know 1 generation back. That's not good. Some people know 2 generations back. Very few people actually take the time to study 3 generations back and then look at the pedigrees of all of the individuals in that 3rd generation. This is what you really need to do. Don't send your pedigree to me and ask me to identify what traits you need to breed for, or if the pedigree is a good combination. Hey, Lee, I'm going to breed this dog to his sister, or this dog to his mother, or this dog to his daughter, or this dog to his cousin, or this dog to his aunt. whatever it is. Don't do that. I can't. I'd have to learn all the pedigrees in your dogs, and I can't take the time to do that. So I said we're going to look at this next generation. So you can see here that I'm outcrossing this dog to Banshee. Why? Well, I said I like the qualities of the game bred American Pit Bull Terrier for what they are. I just want to add more size. Well, therefore, I made sure that Banshee that I'm going to take to this dog here doesn't have any of the weaknesses. So I wanted more size, which means I'm not going to breed to a small dog. I wanted to make sure I maintain the confidence, so I'm not going to breed to an insecure dog. All right, so these are things that I'm looking for while still maintaining the desired traits of the American Pit Bull Terrier. Well, you can also see she is a daughter of Frankie Bomp. So Bam Bam is double bred on Frankie Bomp, and then Banshee is a daughter of Frankie Bomp. So this breeding is 3 times Frankie Bomp. So as a result of that, we really need to make sure we know Frankie Bomp very well before getting a pup off of this combination. I did know him well. I owned him for years and years and years, and therefore I'm confident with that. This here is our out. This is where the brindle trade is coming from. But what else do we see coming in from Komodo? Lucky 7 was a very large dog. This dog got up in the high 60s. He was like 68 pounds in this photo right here. And if he was conditioned and put in optimal weight, he would have been in the high 50s, probably somewhere around 57. He was a big dog. You can see I'm 6 foot tall. That's my waistline right there. He's all the way up to my waistline. That's a big game bred American Pit Bull Terrier. And when I bred him, I noticed that sometimes he would not throw consistently. All right. Now he threw fairly well, but it wasn't always great consistency. So what did I do to fix that? I took him back to his sister. I bred him directly to his sister. The reason why I did that is I wanted to capture the size that he was able to produce and the confidence that he was able to produce, and both of those traits that he displayed. But I wanted an offspring that showed those traits while also making it a more consistent producer. So by breeding him to his sister, I would what's called increase the homozygosity in the daughter. That's going to be Komodo. Now, I would not expect her to be as big as him because this is a boy, and boys typically are 20% bigger than the females. So, if he was basically in the high 50s to high 60s, depending on if he was conditioned or not, I'd like her to be no more than basically 10 pounds smaller than that. Well, she was about a 50-pound dog. Okay, so that's not a giant dog, but that's not a small dog. For a pit bull, that female, that's a pretty good sized dog. So I took that female that was bred on that to sustain those traits that he had, bred back to his big sister that also had really desired traits. This dog here, we did protection work with her. But what is the basis behind them? Well, if we look at Komodo's pedigree, since she is off of him bred back to his sister, we're going to see the same pedigree on her top and her bottom. So instead of looking at her, let's go back a generation because it's just going to be the same thing on her top side as it is her bottom side. So we're going to look at Lucky 7, and we'll see that he is basically, we're going to have a lot of Mayday stuff in here, we're going to have a lot of Red Boy Jocko Bolio Tombstone. So let's look at his stats. All right. So by looking at the AGR influence, we see that we have Tance Yellow. If you don't know Tance Yellow, you don't know pit bulls. This is a very good producing dog that had good size to him. Mayday, excellent producing dog that had a lot of size to him. None of these dogs are on the small side, so to speak. All right, so this is Tance Travis. This is another very well producer. ROM stands for Register of Merit, one-time winner, another famous dog. But let's check out his pedigree and see how he's bred. So we're going to click on him and see how he's bred. And look, what do you know? We've got more of the yellow and yellow John stuff. The Red Boy Jocko basically is what we see. Red Boy's coming in here, and we got Jocko coming in down here. And we got Jocko coming in down here. On the bottom side, the same thing. Yellow John, Red Boy. And then we're going to have the Jeep. Okay, so these are all great dogs. So we're going to look and see. We've got Deadlift, famous dog. We've got Yellow John, famous dog. Weirdo, famous dog. All right, we've got AAA, famous dog. Red Devil, famous dog. Mayday, famous dog. What are we seeing here? We're seeing dogs that are consistently high quality dogs with decent size. Okay, let's back up. And that's what he is, a high quality dog with size. So if we can get that to consistently reproduce itself, and he was bred with a his sister, that's what we have in her. So we're going to try to get those high quality dogs that go back in that history of that lineage, and then take it back to Frankie Bomb. That way, we're not breeding Frankie Bomb to any dog that's going to remove the highly desired traits that he has. I don't want to outcross to something that's different, totally different. Okay, I want to outcross that is kind of carrying those same highly desired traits. All right, and that's what gave us Banshee, as well as another bitch named Bakoti. Let's go ahead and click on Banshee and look at her sister Bakoti. I'll show you why I want to do that. All right, so this is Bakoti. Now, why did I want to look at her? You can see that I bred Bakoti was off of Komodo and Frankie Bomp the same way that Banshee is. But if you look at her offspring, I actually bred Bakoti to Boomer. And that gave us a female named Riot. And this is Riot. And this dog is one heck of a dog. Great size, great confidence, all the desired traits of the American Pit Bull Terrier, while still maintaining the traits that I wanted from the Soros line. Great gameness, great athleticism, great stamina, agility, health, all those things that are well known within the Pit Bull, but then my version of it. A little bit bigger size and a little bit better confidence. And so this is what I am, the direction of our program. This is how I breed. Let's go back to my breeder sheet. Once you have identified the traits that you desire, don't just breed a dog because it's famous. You need to make sure that you're using dogs that have the traits that you want. You're going to be the one that's responsible for that. Okay, so you need to find the dogs that have the traits that you want. If you have a line of dogs and you're going to outcross that line of dogs that you already have to another line, you need to make sure that that line supplements the line that you're basically already producing. And this is what I meant by when I was focusing on the Soros line and I outcrossed to that Mayday stuff from Lucky Seven and the Wonder Girl influence through Komodo. I wanted to make sure I didn't bring any traits that I didn't desire, because basically those dogs were able to produce the traits that I wanted, but they didn't always do it. So I bred them. I bred before I even brought it into my line. I refined it. I refined it by breeding it back to a sister and then selecting an individual from that high degree of homozygosity to produce a daughter, Komodo, that would be more consistently at reproducing those same good traits. And then I wanted to make sure that I was not bringing any traits that I found undesired. I culled the undesired traits from that line by producing an inbred individual. Now, once you have that inbred individual that's going to be more consistent on those traits, check it before you put it in your line. And when you put it in your line, put it in a little bit, wait a little while, see how those turn out. Don't just throw it in all of your dogs, because then if it doesn't work, you've run your line. You want to just put it into one or put it into two. Let them grow up and see how they work out. If they work out, then you can refine it a little further and save that outcross line as almost another branch that you're going to keep on the side and bring it in occasionally when you need it. But don't just throw it all up in your program. You want to almost keep two lines: your main core family and then that side branch family that has that outcross in it. So Banshee was an outcross, and then Riot was the same outcross, but back 3/4. And so I'm developing another line off that same family that just has a little bit just different version of it. And that way I'm able to preserve the pure family on one side and not having to outcross to a totally different family. So basically we have three things that are occurring. We have our main family line, we have our outcross line, and then we have a combination of those two. Now, the outcross line, yes, it was crossed with the main branch to produce that combination of the two, but the combination of the two is what you take back to your main branch. because you don't want to stick that outcross constantly back into your main line, because then you're going to water down your main line. You need to preserve that main line to a high degree of homozygosity. And then when you outcross into your main line repeatedly, you only do it with the combination line. You don't go heavy on that outcross line. You're going to keep that outcross line as almost, you're going to water down the outcross line by slowly infusing your main line into that and making sure it's working out well for multiple generations before you stick it back repeatedly into your main line. It's going to take time. Now let's go back to this. All right, so you're going to make, this is going to make sure you don't bring any undesired traits into your main line. Now, to do this, we need to understand the steps of natural selection. So the first step of natural selection is overproduction of offspring, which kind of sounds like puppy millish type of behavior, or just breeding dogs for the purpose of breeding dogs. Don't do this if you don't understand it. It's a ton of work. But if you're able to keep a number of dogs, and you really want to refine and advance the program, you're going to have to produce more dogs than you plan on breeding. So let's say, for example, you want to plan on having 10 breeding dogs. Well, to have 10 breeding dogs, you may have to have 20 dogs, because some of those dogs are going to be in the prospect phase. They haven't earned the right to breed. Plus, there's going to be variation within that population, which is the next step. There's going to be variation within the population. You're going to look at that entire population of 20 dogs, and they're going to have to compete. Now, in a natural selective situation, they're going to compete for limited resources, whether it be food or land and whatnot. But in a domesticated situation, they're not going to compete for resources, because you're going to give them what they need to live. Instead, what they're going to do in a domestic situation is they're going to compete to serve your needs or desires. All right. Now, when they compete to serve, you're going to look for that stability, those traits that you're looking for: the stability, the athleticism, the health, all those drives and confidence and recovery time, heat tolerance, durability, speed, efficiency, all that stuff that you've identified in your traits. That's how they're going to serve, by meeting your criteria, your breed standard. Okay, your breed standard, not the breed standard, your breed standard, what the standard that you set for yourself. This is what you're going to have to do. From there, you're going to find the winners, and that's where you get your next generation. The winners are going to reproduce the next generation. Now, after identifying the winners, to make room for their offspring, you're going to have to cull the losers. Now, cull could be spay, it could be neuter, it could be placed into a pet home, it could be, maybe it's a great dog, it just doesn't meet your standards, so you sell it to somebody else who likes that trait. Like, let's just say, for example, a person is breeding for a hog catch dog. They don't care if the dog is a little nervous when a fire truck drives by. All right, so I don't want a dog that's nervous when a fire truck drives by, but maybe the hog hunter doesn't care. I can call the dog from my population by selling such a dog to them, but I need to be honest about that and tell them what it is. And so once you constantly drive the bar through competition, generation after generation, higher and higher and higher, then over time your population is going to adapt or evolve for the traits that you're looking for. And then after you do that, the cycle repeats. So every generation should get a little bit better. If you've been breeding dogs for 10 years or 20 years and 30 years, and you're still talking about dogs from the 1990s or the year 2000, 20 and 30 years ago, that means you're not producing better dogs. You probably need to stop breeding. All right. Because every generation should get more of what you like and less of what you don't like. That is, if you're doing a proper job of competitive selection. Okay, so next, selecting your breeding dogs, or the foundation to the next generation. How are you going to do this? How are you going to select your dogs that you're going to use to build the next generation? Well, you need to identify the traits of every dog in the pedigree whenever possible. Never use a dog that you cannot personally assess unless you deeply trust the person or the title. Like, let's just say, for example, the dog was an ROM, or let's just say the dog was trained in protection work and had a PSA title, or let's say that you know the individual, like let's say Ivan Balabanov for protection training in Schutzen. You know that he is not going to deal with breeding any dog that's lacking qualities. So if he's breeding the dog, you can trust that the dog is worth breeding to. If you're trusting somebody you don't know, that's a bad mistake. Okay, so be careful of that about that. Good or bad? Why do you need to be careful? Why do you need to be very careful? Well, because good or bad, but regardless of what you produce, you're going to be the one that's responsible for that. So assess it whenever you can. If you trust the person or a title, you need to understand they or that title is not going to pay your food bills, your vet bills, or cover any of your losses in the sense of having years and years and years of work gone. All right, so prioritize each dog in the pedigree based on their influence in the pedigree. The more influence they have in the pedigree, the more that individual's dog's traits are going to matter. So if there is any undesired trait, it better be a very minor influence in the pedigree. And it's best to avoid negatives in the pedigree when possible. I will not accept any major negative in a pedigree. Now, let's say I have a dog that performs and it has a trait that I don't like, but it still performs. That dog can be bred, okay, because it does the job. The same way in nature, when a lion catches a gazelle, it doesn't matter why it catches the gazelle. The fact is, it caught this gazelle. And so, when an animal is successful at performance, that individual earns the right to breed in nature. And so, when the animal meets the performance of meeting your needs in domestication, then it earns the right to breed if you wish to breed it. Now, if you have better individuals to breed to, use the better ones. But if this is the best you got, even if it has something you don't like I told somebody one time, you see that dog over there? Her name was Tiggy. She's kind of ugly. I don't like the way she looks, but you know what she does? She wins at everything we do. She wins. So I'm going to breed her, and I'm going to try to improve her looks later on. But right now, I'm going to breed her because that dog is so determined, so committed, so she's going to meet all the requirements of the standard in terms of performance assessment, and we can work on the looks later. So you can deal with that, okay? But what you shouldn't do is accept a dog that loses. So you have to ask yourself, is this a loss or a win based on the genetics, or is it based on some sort of environmental factor? All right, note, use the best dogs that you can find. This is very important. The best dogs you can find. There's so many people that say, yeah, but that dog's expensive. I don't want to spend $3,000 for a stud fee or for a puppy that is unknown. You go buy a couple of pups locally for 500 bucks and none of them work out. You've got two, three, four pups for $500 a piece. You're talking about $1,000 to $2,000. Raise them up for 2 years. You're talking about thousands of dollars. I would say save up and deal with a reputable breeder, even if it's going to cost you a little more. You improve your odds when you deal with a reputable breeder that has a quality of excellent production. Okay, that's going to save you time. Use the best dogs that you can. The years lost and the money lost on dogs that don't work out is years and money you're never going to get back. So don't just use what's convenient or easily affordable. Save up your money and do it right the first time or don't do it at all. A proper foundation will save you time later and it will save you money later. All right, let's go ahead and exit this.